We now get the honor to speak with Canadian folk singer, singer-songwriter, Juno Award winner, canoeist, paddler, Ian Tamblyn. Ian, good to see you.
And you too.
It's Canada Day. Tell us what you've been doing today.
Well, this morning we went sailing on the mighty Gatineau River, which is more of a reservoir than a river or a lake. But we had a good wind from the northwest and sailed for a few hours. Then I went up to my son's house in Val-des-Monts, which is about 45 minutes from here, and set up his sailboat, and then had a nice dinner of, well, of course, hamburgers and some swimming and some tequila too.
Right on. That's great.
Which is you may not know it, it's a well-known Canadian drink.
And are you by Ottawa or Chelsea or?
Yeah, all the places I've just mentioned. The mighty Gatineau is the Gatineau River just north of Ottawa. Goes sort of, the Ottawa River goes northwest, and the Gatineau River goes north. And Val-des-Monts, where I was today, is actually part of Lac Saint-Pierre is actually part of the reservoir that serves the Gatineau River. There are 3 dams and hydro stations on the Gatineau River.
And so you on Canada Day did some sailing, and then it sounds like you really represented some other countries here as well with hamburgers and then tequila, which to me sounds like more of a U.S. Mexico. You went international on Canada Day.
Yeah, I'm not against those kind of things. Immigration has its benefits.
Right, exactly. Well, let's talk about Canada Day. I mean, for people even here in northern Minnesota, I think we certainly know about it, and our local tourism agencies, welcome to our Canadian friends today and so forth here in Grand Marais. But what's Canada Day? What's the vibe there? This is an important day for Canadians, and people go paddling. Or tell us about the significance of this day.
Well, I think it's a day of letting go of the petty, letting go of the regional squabbles and remembering the national celebration. And I think that's an important thing to do. We have the same kind of, not the same serious bifurcation that's going on in the United States right now, but we've got left and right politics going on in our country as well. And today is the day to forget that. It's also a day, I think, and we're in the process of truth and reconciliation with the First Nation people. And in many ways, today is a day to remember that promise that we made a number of years ago to enact a number of the precepts of truth and reconciliation with First Nations in Canada. And I think today is a day to remember that too, that we're only on the road for that. Everywhere I go today, whether it's canoeing or sailing, whatever, where I live is on unceded territory of the Algonquin people. So it's a good day to remember that too.
Right. A lot of our connection, my first, understanding of the First Nations and Prime Minister Trudeau and some of this reconciliation and these official policies that were enacted by the government in Canada came to me through Gord Downey and some of his work that he had been doing in his final years of life. And did you ever get a chance to meet Gord or
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I mean, he is more in the rock and roll world, and as much as I appreciated what he did, particularly in the latter part of his life, no, I mean, I've been at his studio in Bath, Ontario, but I never met the man. No.
Okay. Well, let's talk about your roots in Thunder Bay. I mean, obviously, I know about your background. You and I have known each other now for probably 7 or 8 years, I think, Ian. And you've been so gracious to share your music catalog with us on our podcast about the Boundary Waters and Lake Superior, Quetico, and that's how we first connected. You know, as I said, many years ago now. And Campfire Light has been a song that we've played many times. And but tell us. For people who don't know you as I do, or some of our more dedicated listeners and followers do, you grew up in Thunder Bay and you paddled Lake Superior and all over this area here.
Sure. The one thing that for us that we have in common is Highway 61.
Mm-hmm.
It begins in Fort William. You know, Bob. I know that we'll set up some bleachers in the sun, but those bleachers really should begin in Fort William if we're going on Highway 61.
Yes,
And
right.
so I took Highway 61 from Fort William down to Grand Marais, down to Duluth, Minnesota, to the Minnesota State Fair, where I was introduced to Colt 45, which was a disastrous evening.
Was
anyway,
that what was Dylan doing at that time? When we make reference to Bob and Highway 61 and so forth, like, was this? Tell me the time of this first time down there.
It's in the same period. You actually, it's I forget the name of the club in Duluth or probably Minneapolis that he played at, but I remember seeing Colonel Ray and Glover at the 12 o'clock Scholar. Is that what? Something like that in Minneapolis. I can't remember, but Bob had already passed through and was creating his mythology that he had, he was a circus carny or something, a hobo, and headed to, I think he went to Chicago first and then to New York City. So he was on his way to shedding the Zimmerman. And he was now Bob Dylan. So no, I never saw him, but coming up from the States, we saw Michael Cooney would come up from the States to Thunder Bay to play. Pete Seeger did. And Leo Kottke actually came up. I believe that Leo Kottke actually worked on some Lakers at one point.
Wow.
I'm not sure about that, but, mythology is as good as truth.
Yeah.
Ask any politician.
Right. And so Neil Young and the Hearst, they came to Fort William or what's now Thunder Bay at some point.
Yeah.
Right?
During a period of 64 to 66, it was a very vibrant place, despite the fact, like Grand Marais, Duluth, it was in the middle of nowhere. And yet there was this power about, for me, this power about being in this town, which was a terminus for the seaway coming into the middle of North America. You think of Duluth, Superior, or Thunder Bay. How outrageous that these ships could come from across the world and end up being parked in the harbor in Duluth, Superior, or in Thunder Bay, or the train that came through there. So for me, Thunder Bay had a lot of torque. It just had a lot of creative torque. And I worked on the ships on the midnight shift in my teenage years, and it was a whole different world. You saw, a Polish ship would come in and everybody's speaking Polish, and it was quite different. And at the same time, that was when Neil Young and the Squires were playing in Fort William. That's where Neil originally met Stephen Stills. He was playing with the Serendipity Singers or something like that. But there was another band from Sault Ste. Marie called the Vendettas, and they became the Kensington Market, which was a big Canadian group. But when Keith McKay was the lead singer in the Vendettas, and he had Keith Richards and, Mick Jagger down cold. So for 2 years, it was really a vibrant music scene. And on Victoria Avenue, on a Friday night, there'd be 1,500 to 2,000 people on the street.
Yeah. Wow.
I never
And
saw that. I can honestly say I never saw that in Duluth Superior. I may have seen that in a delusionary state at the Minnesota State Fair, but uh, it was happening.
yeah, and well, you wrote a song about Thunder Bay called "Hometown" and how it's kind of washed up and burned out, and not the town you remember. Like, is it a different
Well,
scene when you go back nowadays, or you feel differently about it?
it's an interest. That's an interesting song because it wasn't well received in Thunder Bay. They hated that song, but it wasn't just about Thunder Bay. It could be about Duluth Superior. It could be about Hibbing, Minnesota, or Ely. All those places that, including my town, are one resource towns. Whether it's they're now, the iron ore is gone, they're pelletizing it, but it's gone. And so when a primary resource is gone, whether it's in Atikokan or it's in Hibbing, Minnesota, or the Mesabi Range, is that what it's called?
Yeah, the Iron Range, Mesabi
The
Range.
Iron
Yeah.
Range. Yeah. So when it's gone, the next thing that you see is the faded Chamber of Commerce sign on the outside these towns, because the corporate people who had those places, they've moved on to the next place. And so that's what the song was about. It was outrage that there's no responsibility for these communities that put their heart and soul into the community, only have the board of governors from the company that's overruling the whole town. As soon as the resource is gone, it's gone. And that includes, in northwestern Ontario, the boundary waters. Like if you're cutting down the forest, that's not a renewable resource. That takes 120 years to restore. So the paper mills aren't going to stay there. They're going to be next. They're going to be plywood factories or whatever it is. And but it ain't going to be the the first forest. It's gone, and it'll take 120 years for a swamp spruce to come back. And it's just, to me, that's why I wrote that song, because there is no responsibility in those who have to maintain those communities that put so much into them.
Mm-hmm. And when did paddling? I mean, I can hear the passion in your voice. You're talking about the resources, and you and I have talked about the value of water and the importance of clean water, and some of our other discussions. And when did paddling and that aspect of your songwriting enter? Was that tell me about that? Like songs like "Getting Out on the Water," paddling, and the campfire light, and so forth.
Well, I think probably your audience will know everybody leaves their home. And when I left Thunder Bay, I left Lake Superior. Lake Superior, after the lamprey came in 1957, the commercial fishing was gone, and so was the sport fishing. It was gone. I actually, oddly enough, as a kid, I slid into second base, and the next week I had this scar on my leg and went swimming in the Mackenzie River. The next thing I knew, I had a lamprey on my leg, which was really icky, and the girls really didn't like that. And anyway, so, but basically, Lake Superior was abandoned. It was ghostly. Nobody went out on it, and it became in that ghost period. It became fearful. So there were no pleasure boats on Superior. Canoes disappeared. Everything else in that 57 to 71, 72 period, it sort of disappeared. So I went to university in Peterborough, and there I sort of hitched up with a guy who said, "We got to go canoeing." I said, "I've never been canoeing." So he basically instructed me. And then the next thing we know, I'm learning about Bill Mason is sort of the big founder of the return of the canoe in Canada. He was largely responsible for it. And then another writer by the name of Wayland Drew, who also canoed on Lake Superior at that time. There were only two people canoeing on Lake Superior, the North Shore of Superior, in 1971-72. Maybe Michael O'Connor was on there, but maybe three. And so when we started canoeing, there was nobody on that lake. There were no sea lice, which are also known as kayaks. Uh, but now it is predominantly sea lice on that lake.
Right.
And so the is more popular, but it's uh, my first real canoe trip was on Lake Superior
Wow.
for
Wow.
2 weeks.
Hey, I just saw like 2 days ago, I think it was, the New York Times wrote an article about the Canadian Canoe Museum
Oh,
sort of finally opening, and it seemed like maybe there was a bit of drama involved in that. Or what can you tell us about this canoe museum? And is it?
I played at the opening of it.
Yeah.
It is soul stirring, man. It is to go in there. There's 640 odd canoes kept in this place. Canoes from all over the world, dugout canoes, uh, West Coast war canoes, everything. It's all there. Bill Mason, who I just mentioned, I think he has 14 canoes there.
Wow.
And
Wow.
as you step up into it, there's this wonderful, wonderful sort of display. And in beyond that, there's the warehouse of the 640 odd canoes. But in this area, a circular area, there are all these famous canoes and canoeists there. And it's stunning.
Wow. And the
I think it was 60 or $70 million to
right.
build the damn thing.
I saw
And
that. Yeah. And there were some delays or something. All right. The Times
oh
was
yes,
suggesting that.
in a building like that, you can be sure there's going to be politics.
Yeah. But that's by Peterborough up north of Toronto, a few
Yes,
hours.
Peterborough's northeast of Toronto,
Mhm.
about an hour and a half.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to get over, and what an honor for you to be asked to play at the opening of that.
It was great. And one of the neat things is that you can go there, and it's right beside a lake, and they have a boathouse there, and they take canoes from, working canoes from the museum, and you can go out and paddle on.
Nice. Oh, wow, cool. Yeah, I would love to. We need to take a Minnesota trip, get some of my people to drive over there or get a trip to check out this museum. It looks spectacular in the photographs.
Well, I understand. I just want to assure. There's been a lot of recent talk about terror around the borders. I would like to say that the Canadian border is relatively safe. There's not a lot of us that really want to get into the United States these days.
I was just at the border. I know they were having some issues with the people wanting a better salary or wages. Some of the customs people wanting that, but I got through no problem. I was in Thunder Bay maybe 2 weeks ago and met someone up there who has a YouTube channel called Lost Lakes, which you should check out, Ian. If you have not watched the Lost Lakes YouTube channel, it's a couple in Thunder Bay is where they live now, who make videos of their paddling all around Ontario. They're the best of the best. I'll send you a link so you can check them out.
Okay.
But
Well, I
yeah,
was up there last summer researching a play in Kenora and ended up canoeing in Quetico, which
nice.
is inhabited by 80% Americans, apparently.
It is, especially the Cache Bay entrances and over on the other side, even up in Atikokan now. Sometimes.
I went in at Pickerel Lake.
Mm-hmm. How was your trip? Did you spend a night or a day trip or
A couple of days.
Wow.
And I really appreciated the fact that there were no outboard motors, nothing. It was fabulous.
Yeah. Wow. So are you starting to grasp your legacy at this point when you get invited to things like to present at the Canoe Museum at the opening, and just as you're seeing your catalog and just it's Canada Day? I mean, do you use that as an opportunity to reflect on your life and work at this point?
No. No. It's only what's ahead. You're only as good as what you do next.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
You know what? And I hope that someone will have the courage to tell me that my best before day is long since past. But so far, nobody's had the nerve.
Mm. Well, Ian, I mean, your generosity with your time here on Canada Day, sharing all your catalog with us over these years now, many years, for our podcast and other work we do is just so greatly appreciated. And I know you've had a long and good day today on Canada
Well,
Day. So
I did want to share something with you.
yeah, please.
Quite recently, there was a guy from the States in a kayak who flipped over um, near Silver Islet near Thunder Bay. And he he was saying some things about the lake and how he wasn't prepared for it. Um, I just have two things to say about that, and one of them, when you go to the lake, a big lake like Superior, it really is good to honor the idea of First Nation idea of giving a gift to the lake, because it then sets your relationship to the lake in a proper way. It's a bigger force than you, a much bigger force. And so by giving a gift to the lake, you're asking safe passage, or bequesting safe passage. And it also sets you up in, whether you believe it or not, it's good to subscribe to it, because then it puts you in a territory of being prudent. If you have given yourself that humbleness at the beginning of the lake, when you're out on the lake, you're more prudent about the circumstances that you're in.
Mhm.
And with Lake Superior, you have, if it turns south or bad on you, you've got 15 minutes to get off the lake. So never find yourself in a situation where you can't get off the lake in 15 minutes. Either because if you find yourself in that situation, you have broken the first rule.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You
Right.
just don't get yourself in that situation where you're in a 4-foot chop with a cross chop. Don't put yourself in that situation. Don't go out in it, and observe it, and go, no. And so I sort of had questions about that guy. I mean, I'm really glad but I honestly don't think he got it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be nervy enough to say, be humble on the shore and know when to get off that lake, because it can it can change very quickly.
Right. Yeah, we've been talking a lot about that, and not just Superior this year. Some of the bigger lakes on in Quetico and the Boundary Waters, where people have capsized. We've had 3 deaths in the Boundary Waters already this year. One in Quetico, not far from Saginaw at the end of the Gunflint Trail. Saginaw's Lake, American died there in Quetico, and that's big water. It's big water, and it's cold in May, and so we've been
It
talking
is.
about this a lot, Ian. This
Yeah.
theme you're talking about.
Well, especially, if you're on a north-south lake and you've got a north wind coming down, that's a long fetch. So that chop can build up very quickly, and is not suitable for kayak or canoe.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
but you just got, it's just look for the signs, as they say, and
Yes.
and be. It borders on a spiritual belief, but I really think that one should be really, really careful and enjoy it, but know what forces you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Wow. I'm glad you brought that up, Ian, and we were able to talk about safety on Canada Day as we try to celebrate and have fun, and we can still have this recognition of the power of the water that you sing about so often and eloquently, and that we talk about so often. Safety and Paddle and Portage. And thank you, Ian. Thank you for your time, and thank you for this discussion. I always appreciate hearing from you and being able to talk with you. It's an honor for me. Thank you.
I'm very glad that the Mishpicotton arrived safely back in the States.
Yeah, we're all kinds of news happening on the big lake, as is often the case. Yeah. Thank
Yep.
you, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.